like, and make sure to engage in comments and share this video to your friends and story lovers, and click on the subscribe button on the screen to subscribe to Inquisco for more real and true stories like this. I stood at the front of the lecture hall, flipping through my notes, but my mind wasn't on the material. It should have been. This was the kind of moment I lived for, the kind of career I'd built for myself after years of studying, writing, and proving myself in a field dominated by men. But all I could think about was him, Leo, a foreign student, bright-eyed and eager, with an accent that made the simplest sentences sound like poetry. He had a sharp mind, an insatiable curiosity, and a way of looking at me that felt different. At first, I dismissed it as admiration, the kind that students often develop for their professors. But admiration shouldn't send shivers down my spine. Admiration shouldn't make me hesitate before calling on him, knowing that if our eyes met for too long, something unspoken would pass between us. I tried to ignore it. I was married, after all. My husband, Mark, was a good man, steady, reliable. We had built a life together, one of mutual respect, shared responsibilities, and quiet companionship. Love had once burned brightly between us, but now it was a dim glow, steady, but lacking warmth. We had dinner together. We discussed the bills. We watched TV side by side. But passion, that was something we both seemed to have accepted as lost. And then Leo walked into my class. It started in small, innocent ways. He lingered after lectures, asking thoughtful questions that extended beyond the syllabus. He would tilt his head when he listened, his eyes locked on mine as if I were the only person in the room. He was older than the typical student, mid-20s, mature, confident in a way that made me forget, for a moment, that I was his professor. One afternoon, after class, he stopped by my office under the pretense of needing clarification on a research paper. I expected a quick conversation, but we ended up talking for almost an hour, about literature, about life, about the struggles of finding meaning in a world that often felt mechanical. When he finally left, I realized my hands were trembling. That night, at home, I lay in bed, next to Mark, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment, the way Leo leaned in when he spoke, the way his voice softened when he asked about my own research, the way he made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. It was dangerous. I knew that. But some part of me didn't want to stop. A week passed. I told myself I was imagining things, that the way Leo looked at me was nothing more than the admiration any dedicated student would have for their professor, that I was reading too much into the lingering moments, the stolen glances. But deep down, I knew better. It was the way my breath hitched when I saw his name in my inbox, the way my heart pounded whenever I heard his voice in the lecture hall, the way I found myself searching for him in the crowd, only to find he was already watching me. And then, one evening, it escalated. I stayed late in my office, catching up on grading, when a soft knock on my door made me look up. Professor Moore, Leo. I shouldn't have let him in. I should have given him a brief, professional answer and sent him on his way, but instead I gestured toward the chair across from my desk, and he stepped inside, shutting the door behind him. I hope I'm not interrupting. You are, I said, but there was a teasing edge to my voice. A mistake. His lips quirked into a smile, and something passed between us, an unspoken acknowledgement of the line we were towing. He sat resting his forearms on the desk. I had some questions about the paper, but, he exhaled, running a hand through his hair, that's not really why I came. I swallowed hard. Leo, I know, he said quickly. I know this is complicated. Impossible, even. but I can't pretend I don't feel something when I'm around you." A sharp pulse of heat ran through me. I should have shut it down. I should have been firm, professional, but the way he was looking at me, like I was more than a professor, more than just another name on the faculty roster, left me speechless. "You're my student," I finally managed. His smile was sad, knowing. "For a few more months." My breath caught. He wasn't wrong. Once the semester ended, he wouldn't be under my authority anymore. But that didn't change the fact that I was married, that I had built a life with Mark, however dull and predictable it had become. I stood, putting distance between us, but Leo mirrored the movement, stepping around the desk until he was just a breath away. "Tell me to leave," he murmured. I opened my mouth. The words were there, sitting on the tip of my tongue. But I couldn't say them. I wanted to, but the part of me that had been starved of excitement, of connection, of feeling something, anything, held me back. Leo watched me, waiting. His hand hovered near mine, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his skin. One more inch, and we'd be touching. One more second of hesitation, and a sudden vibration from my phone shattered the moment. I stepped back, snatching it from the desk as if it were a lifeline. Mark's name flashed across the screen. My stomach twisted with guilt. My voice was unsteady. "I have to go." Leo didn't argue. He gave me a slow, knowing nod, then turned and walked out, leaving me standing there, pulse racing, heart pounding. I told myself that was the end of it, that I had come too close, and now I'd step back, that I'd be careful. But deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't over, not even close. I avoided him for days. I stuck to my lectures, avoided unnecessary eye contact, and ignored the way my heart clenched every time I felt his gaze on me. I convinced myself that I had done the right thing, that whatever had almost happened in my office was nothing more than a moment out of weakness. But some part of me knew that the storm hadn't passed. It was only waiting. And then, one evening, it came crashing down. It was late. The campus was quiet, the corridors dimly lit as I gathered my things to leave. I had stayed behind again, but this time, I wasn't alone. Leo was waiting. He stood just outside the building, hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. I stopped in my tracks, my heart hammering against my ribs. "You shouldn't be here," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He tilted his head slightly, studying me. "Neither should you." I swallowed hard. "Leo." "I know," he cut me off. "I know you think this is wrong, and maybe it is, though." He took a slow step forward. "But tell me, Professor, if this is so wrong, why are you still standing here?" I opened my mouth, but no words came, because he was right. I wasn't running. I wasn't telling him to stop. I was frozen in place, torn between the life I had built and the fire that burned whenever he was near. And then, as if the universe itself wanted to push me over the edge, the rain started. A slow drizzle at first, turning into a downpour within seconds. I gasped as the cold water soaked through my blouse, my hair sticking to my face. Leo, standing just feet away, was drenched too, but he didn't move. He just stared at me, his chest rising and falling with unspoken words. And then finally, I did something. I turned on my heel and ran, not toward him, not away, just anywhere. I didn't even know where I was going until I found myself at my car, fumbling for my keys, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. The storm raged around me, but my hands were shaking for an entirely different reason. "Let me drive you home." His voice was right behind me. I turned, and there he was, soaking wet, eyes dark with something I couldn't name. I wanted to say no. I should have, but my fingers loosened around the keys. The drive was quiet, tense. My home wasn't far, but every second in that car felt like an eternity. The air was thick, charged with something we both refused to acknowledge. When we finally pulled up in front of my house, I reached for the door handle, ready to escape, but Leo's voice stopped me. Wait. I turned, and then headlights, bright, blinding, pulling into the driveway. Mark. My stomach plummeted. Panic surged through me, but before I could even think, Leo reached across me, his fingers brushing my wrist as he grabbed the keys from the ignition and he shut off the engine, plunging us into silence. The rain pounded against the windshield. Mark's car door slammed shut. Footsteps approached. Leo turned to me, his voice calm, steady. Now what? I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. And then a knock on the window. Mark's voice, muffled but unmistakable. Honey? The car was dark, silent. If we stayed still, maybe... But then, just as I thought the worst was over, the dashboard lights flickered back on, and Leo's voice, barely above a whisper. Oops. The doors automatically unlocked, and outside in the rain, Mark's shadow loomed. I turned to Leo, my pulse roaring in my ears. He was smiling. Not an accident, not a mistake. This was planned. I had just walked into a trap. Click on the subscribe button on the screen to subscribe to Inquisco for more real and true stories like this.